Hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome back. Welcome to good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever it is you are coming from. This is Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. I did a little thing with some true crime reacts, and I found this case. Um, it involved a young lady who had been murdered one night. She had left the bar after a night out with her husband and some friend, or her boyfriend and some friends, and she didn't make it home. Um, and so uh, that sparked my interest to find the trial, if possible, and turns out I did. So I thought I'd go back and watch it and see how it all played out. And this is the trial of George Burch in the murder of, I can't remember the lady's name right now. I think it was Niki Vanderheyden, I think was her name. I think I've watched a couple different things tonight, but I think Niki Vanderheyden was her name. And originally they had arrested the boyfriend, and he was later cleared. He was later cleared because the Fitbit that he was wearing showed that he did not have any activity the night of the incident. And then there was some DNA that was found on the victim that led to Mr. Burch. So that led to his arrest. And so that's what brought us to this. And this is another trial out of Wisconsin. So you would think that I lived in Wisconsin, but I don't. Trials just seem to happen a lot in Wisconsin. I don't know. I don't know what it is about Wisconsin, but they seem to have a lot of issues that are televised, or there just seems to be the it thing right now. I don't know. Just seems like that's what I've seen most recently. I think like the last 3 that I've watched have been in Wisconsin. So, 3 or 4, I don't even know. But so this one is a murder trial. So again, Wisconsin does not have the death penalty. It is just life with the possibility of parole and life without. So those are the only options. Don't get anything else. And so yeah, that's where we're going to go with this one. And we will see. This video, I did kind of watch just the first little bit just to make sure it played and whatnot. The volume is very, very low, but they do have closed captioning. So hopefully you guys can hear. Put some headphones in. Hopefully I will try not to talk over too much, but yeah. Okay. Again, I am not a legal expert. This is not legal advice. I do not have a law degree. So this is just my comments, my opinions, my thoughts on the case. Bless you.
We represent the people of Brown County. They're making sure that our community is secure, that justice is found, that people who commit offenses in this community, particularly violent offenses, are held accountable for their actions. When crime is committed in Brown County, law enforcement collect evidence, investigates the case. To support their investigation, they collect physical evidence, collect statements, anything that supports the investigation to determine if a crime was committed. Law enforcement turns that evidence over to the district attorney's office.
These are opening statements, by the way.
If there is sufficient evidence to support allegations and charges, the district attorney's office issues those charges. We'll work alongside both who are accountable for their actions and find justice before they commit crime. That is what our role is. Collect evidence to ascertain the truth. The truth about who murdered Nicole Vanderheyden. Nicole was murdered on the evening of May 21st, 2016. That is exactly what the Brown County Sheriff's Office has done in this case. They have collected evidence. They have talked to witnesses. They have obtained warrants. They have physical evidence. They have technological evidence to support the case that they presented to our office, the case that we will present to you. They have followed the path laid out by that evidence. Evidence which will uncover the identity of Niki's killer, George Stephen Burch. I've defined our role in this case, but I also wanted to define yours. You are the sole judges of the facts in this case. The court is the judge of the law, as he just read you, but you are the judges of the facts. You are tasked with listening to the evidence that's presented on that witness stand. You are tasked with determining the credibility of the testimony and determining the truth in order to find justice. For that, I want to sincerely express our appreciation. Thank you. Thank you for giving of your time, taking time away from work, family, from other commitments. We know that this is not an easy task. For the next couple of weeks, you will be here listening to evidence. All of the parties involved understand what you have given up in order to do this. And we thank you for making our system of justice work. It's important that you give your time to this case and your very close attention. This case is clearly important to a great number of people. It's important to Mr. Burch. As he sits there today, he is not guilty. The state must prove that he is guilty. So it's obviously very important to Mr. Burch. He's charged with the crime. But this case is also very important to the family of Nicole Vanderheyden, to the many people who loved and cared about her. This case is important to our community. You'll see a glimpse of what law enforcement has done to attempt to keep people accountable from one of our public's great fears: senseless, vicious, random acts of violence. The citizens of Brown County value few things more than their personal security. Something like in our community to anyone at any time.
I think I watch Wisconsin trials just so I can make fun of how they
This
talk.
particular night, it was Nicole Vanderheyden. And any other night, it could happen in the village of Bellevue, the city of De Pere, the town of Ledgeview.
Not make
violent,
fun of it.
ruthless killer
I'll make fun
could
of it.
do what we
I
believe
like
the
the way
evidence
they
would show
talk.
Mr. Burch did.
It's funny.
Niki Vanderheyden. The truth must be found, justice must prevail, and Mr. Burch must be held accountable. We start today with opening statements. This is the opportunity that the parties have to address you, to make our comments directly to you, and provide a framework for what we believe the evidence will show in this case. The roadmap of evidence that put officers on the path to finding out who killed Nicole. The one other time that we'll have an opportunity to directly talk to you in this way is at closing arguments. In between, the people who will give you the evidence that you are to consider are all of the witnesses who will sit right there on that stand and tell you about what they did, the work that they did to collect evidence, their personal observations, the forensic DNA, and technological evidence that supports the state's case and allows us to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. These are law enforcement officers who never met Nicole. They are independent forensic analysts. They are crime lab analysts. They are experts in their field. They will be called to help you sort through technical, medical, physical evidence to tell us what happened to Niki and to tell you who did it. As we present our case, we ask that you listen closely to all of us and that testimony, and you rely on that evidence and base your decision on it, because the evidence is what will prove this case. You will follow that evidence and come to the same conclusion that we have. What I'm saying to you now, what defense counsel will say to you shortly, that is not evidence. Testimony is evidence. The physical evidence that you see is evidence. The autopsy results, the DNA identification, the Google dashboard data, the records from Fitbit, the internet searches off of people's phones. That is the evidence that will drive you. You will be the eyes and ears in this case. You will hear that evidence. You will decide what happened. You will give justice to Nicole. Niki Vanderheyden was a 31-year-old mother of 3, a substitute school teacher, a friendly soul, a friend to many who loved her dearly. A woman with a lot of life to live, whose life was ended far too soon, for no clear reason. That's Nicole. On May 21st of 2016, at approximately 1 p.m., the Vanderheydens, so a young boy and his grandfather, and Jacob Vincent, locate the body of Nicole Vanderheyden in a tree line of field on Hoffman Road in the village of Burch. Law enforcement and the medical examiner are called in to process the scene. They are at the scene within minutes. The scene is secured. Officers come in. Crime scene medical examiner's office comes in. They collect evidence according to their protocols, entering the scene in quick suits to try to preserve evidence. Niki's body is examined, swabbed for DNA evidence taken on scene, later taken at autopsy. There's Hoffman Road, the dirt road entrance into the field. The yellow dot is the location in the tree line where Nicole's body was found. Right there in the village of Burch, practically in the center of town. Just up the road of Hoffman is East River Drive, Ziggy's Restaurant, residential neighborhoods. About a mile from the sheriff's office up the road on Hoffman.
Yeah, she was
Shortly
just
after
dumped.
Niki is found, an autopsy is performed by Dr. Rogalska. She noted 241 injuries in Niki's body. Dispersed, but they took place relatively within the same time. The manner of death is determined to be homicide. At the end of the case, we will talk to you about the elements in this case, and the elements of this offense are actually very simple. Did George Burch cause Niki's death, and did he do so with intent to kill her? When you hear the Rogalska's testimony, you will have no doubt that when George did this to her, he intended to kill her. These are substantial, repeated physical injuries. There can be no doubt as to intent to kill her. Shortly after Niki's body was found, officers responded to the residence of Douglas D. Nicole Vanderheyden. Niki's boyfriend was Doug. They shared a child in common, a 6-month-old child named Dylan. Doug called in Niki as a missing person within hours after her body was found. Officers came out to Doug's residence. He voluntarily spoke with them for 2 hours. He showed them his cell phone. He had his friend there trying to piece together where Niki had gone. Doug did not know at that point in time that Niki was dead or that officers had found a body. Officers were aware of that. Doug was not. Doug was providing information to help law enforcement try to find Niki. He pieced together the information that they had from the previous night. Doug and Niki had gone out with some friends. They went to a concert at the watering hole. They saw a band. When the band was done, Doug and his friend Greg were off chatting. They met some friends from high school that they hadn't seen in a while. Niki left with Doug's friends. She went downtown to the sardine can with a group of Doug's friends, with the understanding that Doug and Greg would be arriving at the sardine can later to meet with them. Doug and Niki were having a good time at the watering hole. They had some drinks, they had some laughs, they had some fun. They did not get into an argument of physical disturbance when they were together at the watering hole. When they got to the sardine can, it was apparent that Niki had consumed quite a bit of alcohol that night, at least relative to what her normal practice was. Niki had a baby 6 months earlier. She had only been out a handful of times since the birth of Dylan. She was not a regular drinker. Niki was pretty impaired. When she got to the sardine can, she was dancing, she was having fun. The group of people that were Doug's friends had noticed that she probably had a little too much to drink. They were contacting Doug and Greg to find out when are they coming down to the sardine can to pick up Niki, because they were deciding to leave and move on to the next place. When they called an Uber,
It's an unfortunate name for a
Nikki got a little mad at one of Doug's friends.
Pub or whatever, sardine
He walked
can.
off down Howard Street, away from Broadway, toward the old M&I BMO Harris Bank. Aaron Polinsky attempted to go after her and bring her back. That's when Nikki got a little combative with him, and she walked off. And that was the last time that anyone who knew her saw her alive. About 12:30 a.m. on the morning of May 21st, 2016. Shortly thereafter, Doug and Greg arrive at the sardine can. They had been attempting phone contact with Nikki. They knew from some of the friends that Nikki had walked off. They attempted to drove around a little bit looking for her. After stopping in the driveway, a friend they didn't know wasn't their house anymore. They did not locate Nikki. They went to the sardine can. They asked people at the sardine can if they had seen her, looking for her, making attempts to call her. Nikki's phone went off. We later recovered Nikki's phone, did a forensic download of that phone. It's basically not transmitting any information after a little after 12:30 a.m. that day. Nikki's phone powered off. Was not receiving calls and texts, going straight to voicemail. No opportunity to connect with her. There's the sardine can bar on Broadway, the near west side. The last place Nikki was seen. On the morning of the first, Peterson, who is the neighbor of Nikki and Doug across the street and offset a little bit, is mowing his lawn. And with his lawnmower, he hit that piece of wire cord in his yard. He actually noted it, thought maybe it was a piece of the lawnmower, picked it up and tossed it onto the street. He also noted a good deal of blood on the street outside of his house. At that point in time, Saturday morning, Nikki's body had not been found. He wasn't aware that there was any thought of a homicide or a missing person. He assumed that someone had struck an animal, maybe a deer, but there was a substantial amount of blood which he noted to be fresh. He didn't report it at that time, not on May 21st. Dr. Regalso will later opine that cord is consistent with the ligature marks that are found on Nikki's neck. The Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory will confirm DNA is on that cord. That is the device that is used to strangle her. In addition to Matthew Peterson, who testifies about finding the cord, there are also some individuals who will note they saw that same blood stain and set our time frame. At 5:45 a.m., Paul Neuenfeld and his friend were jogging that morning on Berkeley Road, and they noted a big pool of blood in the road, and Paul tried to jump over it. He again thought perhaps it was an animal that had been struck, but he noted that fresh blood was in the road by 5:45 a.m. on May 21st of 2016. That is our crime scene. That is our time frame. That is actually confirmed independently by dash cam video from a young man, a high schooler, who was coming back home from a Deep Pier High School lockout, returning home that morning, and his mother, careful, has a dash cam from the insurance company installed in his car. And he actually is taking his path home from the high school to his home, and you can see on that, somewhat see the pool of blood on the side, and you can definitely see Paul and his friend jogging again at about 5:47 a.m. on Saturday morning, May 21st of 2016. Again, confirming our time frame. This is the investigation that law enforcement did to ensure that they could arrive at the truth.
Somebody didn't turn their phone off. Ruh-roh.
May 22nd, 2016, in the morning hours, officers located Nikki's clothing on the on-ramp to Highway 172 in GV. The clothing she had worn the night before that had been observed on surveillance video, consistent with the clothing from descriptions of friends, pants, black and gray striped shirt, her undershirt, her underwear, her phone, her purse, personal items, found tossed on the side of the road on 172 in GV. The blood on the shirt confirmed that it was Nikki's shirt, and again, the outer clothing blood-soaked. Her shirt, her pants, her underwear, blood-soaked. Another map. Doug and Nikki's residence, Berkeley Road in Ledgeview. Nikki's body located off of Hoffman Road in the village of Bellevue. Her clothing found at 172 in GV. As part of the investigation in this case, law enforcement officers sent a series of swabs, DNA swabs, primarily at first from Nicole's body, to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. We need to identify who is the person that killed Nikki. Consistently from those swabs, they are finding what they know to be unknown male DNA. And when I say unknown, it's because officers, as part of their investigation, had obtained samples from known parties in this case. They had obtained samples from Doug Dietrich, from his friend Greg Matthew, from his friend Aaron Polinsky, from two individuals that Nikki is seen talking to at the sardine can that night on surveillance video. Those people provided DNA samples from Nicole's ex-husband, from her two male children. All of those people provided buccal swabs, standard samples to the state crime lab. And the state crime lab is consistently finding male DNA at key points on Nikki's body. And all of those individuals are excluded. by the DNA testing from the lab. There is an unknown male sample on the body that the crime lab is attempting to identify. At some point in time, and the lab analyst will explain to you the complexities of DNA, but there's two main types, YSTR, or male amplified DNA, and autosomal STR, which is the DNA that you can put into a database and compare. So at some point in time, the lab actually stops looking for YSTR DNA because they've got so many samples of this unknown male, and they're trying to find a sample somewhere on Niki's body that they can compare in a national database. That's found on Niki's sock. On Niki's sock, they find an autosomal DNA profile, they put it into a national database, and it comes back with a hit, George Burch. Until this point, in August, several months after her death, no one's ever heard of George Burch. He's got no involvement with this family, no involvement with Niki, no involvement with Doug or any of his friends, no involvement with anyone in the case. Completely unknown, completely strange to this situation. So of course, law enforcement is curious. Who is George Burch? Why is his DNA showing up on Niki's sock? They look in law enforcement database, and they find information about George Burch. Before I get to that, I want to talk about where was that DNA profile found. Later, officers obtain a buccal swab from George Burch, and they send it down to the lab, and they compare it. They take an additional test, because that initial hit, that's just for investigative purposes. They actually take the other step of obtaining George's DNA directly from him, sending it back down to the crime lab to confirm it. Underlined is the right foot sock. That is the location of the autosomal or the comparative DNA. There is a mixture of DNA on Niki's sock. Niki is the source of the female DNA. It is 1 in 574 trillion times more likely
There's a
the
DNA
stock instead of George Burch than it is of any other unrelated person. 1 in 574 trillion. There are roughly 7 billion people on Earth. That's 574,000 times the Earth's population. That's how likely it is that that's George's DNA. But in addition, they use that sample from George Burch to develop a Y profile. They know what his Y profile is. And his Y profile is consistent with the DNA found in all of these locations on Nicole's body. Vaginal swabs, cervical swabs, left forearm, left wrist, right wrist, left ankle, right ankle, left neck, left posterior neck, right arm, left arm, mons pubis, left palm, chest, right fingernail clippings. Significantly, his profile is consistent with YSTR DNA found on the cord that was used to kill her. Also found on her left foot sock, the sleeves and shoulder area of her shirt. And look at the samples that are tested. They did not test every single sample from everywhere in her body. You will hear that information. Because they had found all of his DNA consistently on all of these other spots. And look at the spot they're looking for. Where would someone drag a body? Where would they grab a person? Where was she hurt? She was strangled. Look at the neck. Look at the forearms, the wrists, the ankles. Those are the locations that were tested because someone had to drag Niki's body into that field. George Burch's DNA is located on all of those spots in her body where that would be done. The Brown County Sheriff's Office conducted a search for the defendant in local law enforcement databases. They located that he had some police contact relative to a vehicle fire in the city of Green Bay on June 8th of 2016. Green Bay PD conducted a forensic download of the defendant's cell phone. The forensic download yielded some very interesting results. First of all, George Burch is searching for information about this case on the internet on May 22nd, May 24th, May 25th, May 26th, June 5th, June 6th. He is consistently very curious about this case and no other case, this case. You will also hear from Tyler Bailey of the Brown County Sheriff's Office that they obtained what is called Google dashboard data. George Burch has an Android phone, had a Gmail account associated with, which is Google account. They're able to obtain dashboard information that can demonstrate where that phone was located at certain times using a triangulation of data that's all pretty commonly known to us. GPS data, cell phone tower locations, and then hits off of various Wi-Fi. If you pull up your smartphone and you look to see which Wi-Fi might be available in that area, it will bounce off the various options for Wi-Fi. And that might be people's homes, that might be business locations, anywhere where Wi-Fi can be located. So Google triangulates all of that data with varying degrees of accuracy, some of them very accurate, within feet. They can put the defendant's phone at a certain location. All of those dots represent the defendant's cell phone locations on the night of May 20th, 2016 into the morning of May 21st of 2016. We know that Niki was last seen at the sardine can at 12:30 a.m. or shortly after 12:30 a.m. the last time she was seen. From midnight up until 2:32 a.m., George Burch is consistently located at Richard Crane's Bar on Broadway, a short distance from Sardine Can where Nick was last seen. Burch remains at Richard Crane's from 2:32 until 2:38. When he travels to his home, he's staying with Ed and Linda Jackson at that time. 4:22 a.m. is significant because that is the time that he ultimately returns to that home. He's at the home from 2:32 until about 2:38, at which point he starts his journey down Broadway on the west side of Green Bay, over to the pier, across the bridge, down County Highway G, past the Pier High School, over to GB, and down to the Berkeley residence, where he arrives at 3:01 a.m. That's the murder scene. That's where Niki's blood and the cord are found in the side road. George Burch's cell phone was there from 3:01 a.m. until 3:53 a.m. And again, remember the DNA in the body. 20 different locations, injuries consistent with sexual assault, injuries all over her body, including injuries that can be defined as defensive injuries, hands, feet, fingernails. He's there for 52 minutes. No known relation with Niki, no known relation with Doug Dietrich, no reason to be in front of Niki's house, no reason for his DNA to be on her body. Even more significant, from 3:58 a.m. until 4:02 a.m., George Burch's cell phone is pinging off a field on Hoffman Road where Nicole's body was found. And one of those readings is in fact very accurate. Within feet, he is placed in the middle of that field. The location where the body was dumped by the person who killed him. At 4:05 a.m., George Burch is at 172 in GV, the location where Niki's clothes are found.
Like, why did he? I mean,
And at
why did he dump the
4:22 a.m.,
clothes?
he returns home. Takes an odd
There's
route.
too much of his
here.
DNA on
Not
it.
from town. He's from Virginia.
You
Takes a
what,
weird
sir?
route
You
home.
forgot a sock.
Crosses 172, goes all the way over. Sir actually gets there 4:22 and showing he's not really familiar with the area. 4 key locations in this case: the Sardine Can where he was last seen, Berkeley Road where we know Niki was killed, Hoffman Road where we know her body was found, 172 in GV where her clothes are found. George Burch's phone is at all those locations, all within the time frame. His DNA is all over her body. Just for point of reference, the Rowan County Sheriff's Office is right there. When George drove her off the field and came back at 172, he passed that Sheriff's Office coming and going. Yeah, he's not from here, he's from Virginia. Doesn't know it's there. The investigation in this case was not limited just to George Burch. Wide-ranging and ongoing. Officers were not aware of George Burch at all until August. They received the DNA. It's the first time part of this investigation. They worked to try to include or exclude whoever else might be involved in her murder. Naturally, they looked at the people who saw her last, the people who were closest with her. Naturally, they looked at those individuals. They did searches of residences, including the Dietrich residence, twice. They did searches of vehicles. Vehicles were sent to the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory. We knew that Niki's body had been transported. Primary crime scene is Berkeley Road. Her body is found on Hoffman. Somehow she had to be moved. Doug Dietrich's car was at the watering hole that entire night. He drove it there at 7 p.m. on the 20th, and it remained there until law enforcement picked it up. Doug's friend Greg, who gave him a ride home, his car was processed at the State Crime Laboratory. No evidence consistent with this case. Niki's car was found at their home. Doug didn't have access to it. Niki's car is equipped with another insurance company's device to determine when the car was active. Niki's car had not been driven since Friday afternoon on the 20th. Her car didn't move. Nonetheless, that car was processed because officers saw what they thought to be a small amount of blood in that car. And in fact, when the lab processed it, there was a small amount of blood. It is not Nicole's. She was excluded. It was not Nicole's blood in that car. In fact, it did bear some similar markers consistent with having been her female child, who happens to play soccer at 10 years old. A dozen buccal swabs were taken from different individuals to try to determine who is the person whose DNA is on her body. There were DNA profiles consistent with Doug and Dylan. And again, so this is the difference between the standard DNA and the male DNA, the YSTR DNA. Father and son share the same Y DNA profile. So anywhere that Doug's DNA or DNA consistent with Doug is found on her clothes, we have no way of distinguishing whether that's Doug's DNA or whether it's her 6-month-old son Dylan's DNA. There are some locations where there's DNA found, sperm fraction cervical swabs, vaginal swabs, and left-hand fingernail clippings. Those are the only 3 places on the body where DNA consistent with Doug or Dylan is located. lab analyst will testify about those sperm fractions, a very small amount of sperm located. Doug and Nikki lived together, shared a child in common. They had a romantic relationship. There's no question about that. And then DNA consistent with Doug or Dylan is found on several different of her personal effects: her phone, her underwear, toe of a shoe, the wallet, the bra, and the tank top. DNA consistent with Doug or Dylan is located on all of those items. It's not located on any of these items. Not only are those consistent with George Burch, Doug is excluded from all of those swaps. His DNA is not on those locations on the document, despite the fact that they shared a close relationship. Follow the evidence. Follow the path. From the sardine can for Richard Craniums, where you stop at Burch's home, to the location where she's killed, the location where her body is callously dumped, the location where her clothes are tossed aside. Follow the evidence, follow the facts, and it will lead you to truth. The defense's job, I'm sure they will do it well, is going to be to poke holes in the state's case, to make things sound more confusing, to overly complicate the facts in this case, and to try to point out things that aren't there. No one is on video. No one is videotaping the defendant killing Nicole. You do have to follow the evidence to put the pieces together. It is their job to poke holes. It is their job to confuse.
Oh no!
Ladies and gentlemen, as you just heard, we are here under very tragic circumstances. We are here because Nicole Vanderheyden was murdered. As you already know, Nicole is the mother of 3 young children.
That was the prosecution's opening statements. Now this is the defense's words. This is defense's opening statements. So this is Mr. Burch's attorneys. Yeah. I'm trying to keep an open mind, and I hate that I saw the thing that I saw prior to this because it gives me a little bit of bias already. But I am trying, like, even if I hadn't seen it, like, I'm a naturally doubtful person. Like, I naturally have questions just in general. So if I were ever on a jury and they said without a reasonable doubt, I'd be like, I can't not doubt something unless you can 100 million trillion, just like that DNA can, unless you can prove to me without any doubt that this person did not do it, then I cannot. But yeah, I don't know. And if your doubt is not but I say that, but I naturally doubt things, but I also at the same time am really quick to judge, hence the name. But if you can't give me 100% reason why I should believe that he did not do this, I don't have that innocent until proven guilty. I have, by all default, a guilty until proven innocent. And I don't know. Anyway, this is
She loved her family.
defense.
She loved life.
Opening statements.
I agree. She died way too soon. As we progress through this trial, we're going to encounter difficult evidence that never have we wanted to encounter in our lives. It's going to be difficult. And we thank you. George, thanks you for taking on the significant burden and seeing this case through to the right result. The evidence is going to show that the right result is a verdict of not guilty. Yes, the evidence will show that George's DNA, significant amounts of George's DNA, were on various pieces of evidence in this case, including on Nicole's body. The evidence is going to show that George's cell phone went to these various locations. He was with Nicole. The evidence is going to show you there was sexual contact. But at the end of the trial, you will have a completely innocent explanation that ties all of this evidence together. And in tying all of that evidence together, you will realize that George did not murder Nicole. Now remember, the evidence in this case is not what's been presented in the media. It's not what you've heard from friends. It's what you're going to hear in this courtroom. The evidence is going to come in piece by piece, day by day. I ask that you carefully consider each piece of that evidence as it comes in, and consider it as a piece of a puzzle. But don't try to solve the entire puzzle until you have all of the pieces. At the end of this trial, we will give you all of the pieces. You will be able to solve the puzzle. You will know the whole story, and you will know that this was not some random act as the state just described. You will know that Douglas Dietrich, Nicole's boyfriend, murdered Nicole. Ladies and gentlemen, this is George Burch. George Burch is a human being just like me and you. He's a United States citizen, and he's protected by the United States Constitution, the Wisconsin Constitution, and other laws that are designed to restrain the government's authority. This table, there are humans here, but this table is occupied by the government of the state of Wisconsin. They don't represent any particular individual. They represent the government interests as they see fit in this matter. As you've already heard, George is presumed innocent. As he sits here right now, he is considered innocent of this crime. He will remain innocent unless they can convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that he murdered Nicole. The judge already gave you the instruction on the state's burden of proof, presumption of innocence, and what is reasonable doubt.
He just looks guilty.
As you receive each piece of this puzzle, analyze it in light of that instruction. And remember, if you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypothesis consistent with George's innocence, you should do so and return a verdict of not guilty. Ladies and gentlemen, by the end of this trial, you're going to have a more than reasonable explanation. And that reasonable explanation is going to show that George did not commit this crime. Douglas Dietrich committed this crime.
He probably didn't.
Now, some of you might have some preconceived notions of those of us in the courtroom. We've all heard stories of biased judges, corrupt prosecutors, law enforcement, and sleazy defense attorneys that are just looking for loopholes in the law. That's
well, you said it. Here. I did not.
I can say that confidently. Sir. And the reason I can do that is because, for the most part, we agree with all of the state's evidence. And over the course of this trial, we're going to show you that that evidence that they just presented, once you have all the pieces to the puzzle, is consistent with George's innocence. What this case comes down to is the difference between how the state is interpreting this evidence, how the state is arguing this evidence, and what the evidence will actually show you once you have the full picture. I'm not going to complicate the case. We're not going to try to create doubt in your minds. What we're going to do, unlike the state just did in their opening, is give you all of the evidence, give you the whole picture. And once you have that picture, you will know what the truth is. The state just described the initial investigation in this case. What the state didn't tell you, and as you will hear, is all signs of the initial investigation pointed to Douglas Dietrich as being the murderer. What the state didn't just tell you,
Fitbit said he didn't do it.
As you will hear, the state relied upon that evidence and arrested Douglas Dietrich. They took him to jail, and he sat there for 18 days. while he was in jail is when the state got that preliminary DNA testing result that they just described. And in light of that preliminary DNA testing with the unknown male contributor, the state chose to release Doug from custody. It wasn't because there wasn't any evidence that Dietrich committed this, because as you will hear, there was plenty. That's why he was arrested. But upon receiving these preliminary results, the state chose to release Doug. By the end of this trial, you will know why that was the wrong decision. As you just heard, after Doug's release, you didn't hear it was after Doug's release, because you weren't informed that he was arrested. But at some point after Doug's release is when the second DNA results came back that the state just described to you. The DNA results that did indicate George's presence on the sock. What they told you from that point is true. They did further analysis, and they were able to identify George's DNA, and they were able to see that the DNA, the unknown male DNA, was that of George. We don't disagree. We agree. That should be there. Now let's discuss exactly what the evidence is going to show. Keep in mind, when I say evidence, I'm not really talking about evidence that we collected. I'm not talking about stuff that we came up with so that we could confuse you or plant reasonable doubt in your mind. When I say evidence, for the most part, what I'm talking about is the evidence that the state collected and gathered into their investigation when they were looking to Doug Dietrich as being the murderer. It's going to be the evidence that they collected, that law enforcement collected, when all of those signs were pointing to Dietrich as being the murderer. This wasn't a random act. The evidence will show you that Doug had the motive to murder Nicole.
You can't even say words right. I mean, I can't say nothing
George would have any
about
desire
that
to kill
because
Nicole.
I can't say words right either. But
Doug did have that motive. Not only did he have that motive, but the evidence is going to show you that he had the opportunity to murder Nicole. He had direct involvement in her murder. You're going to learn, as this case goes on, through testimony of witnesses, that Doug and Nicole had a toxic relationship engulfed by arguments. The evidence is going to show that on the night of her murder,
the
Doug left
evidence
Nicole with people she barely
will
knew
show
so that he could speak to other girls and snort amphetamines with a friend. You're going to learn
Come
that on
on
the night of
now.
Nicole's murder, she texted Doug, "You're an abusive asshole. Why do you always hurt me?" As this trial goes on, and the state started to explain to you the tragic timeline of events that culminated in Doug's murderous act, you will hear that Friday, May 20th, was supposed to be a fun night out for Nicole. It was a well-deserved break from her normal duties of caring for her young family. Nicole arranged for one of her good friends, Dallas Kennedy, who you're going to hear from, to babysit her young son, Dylan, so that she could go out. The plan was for Nicole to go to a Steel Panther conference at the watering hole with some of Dietrich's friends. You're going to hear at first that everything went smoothly, just like the state just told you. When they were at the watering hole, in the beginning, they were having fun. They were drinking, laughing, dancing, and having a good time. Despite the fact that Nicole had just met some of Dietrich's friends, she was still able to have a good time with them. What the state didn't tell you is that changed. You're going to hear that Doug turned his attention from Nicole to other things more important to him. By the time the concert ended, Doug and his friend Greg were nowhere to be found.
Doug.
You will learn that Nicole, along with Doug's friends, decided that they would continue at the sardine can. Instead of remaining at the watering hole alone, Nicole chose to go with Doug's
Sorry
friends.
if you can hear the
to sardine
snoring. This is just my child.
No one spoke to Doug at this time. No one knew where Doug was. By the time the group arrived at the sardine can, even Doug's own friends were getting concerned as to why Doug was not with Nicole. You will hear that Doug's own friend, not Nicole's friend, but one of Doug's close friends, Angela, offered to call Doug after she saw Nicole was unsuccessful in her attempts to get a hold of him. Even though Doug had not answered all of Nicole's calls, he answered Angela's first call. Angela admonished Doug, asked him where the heck he was, and told him to get to the sardine can now because your girlfriend is alone. It wasn't until this point that Doug had any concern about Nicole. It wasn't until this point that Doug and his friend Greg attempted to catch up with the group at the sardine can. And the evidence is going to show you that the reason why they were still at the sardine can is because they were drinking, talking with other women, and snorting amphetamines.
Those doggone amphetamines.
When they were finally on their way, or close to being on their way to the sardine can, Doug and Greg were able to finally connect with Nicole on a phone call. But it was too late. Nicole had had enough. They argued to no avail. Doug's friend Greg tried to intervene, but the call ended angrily. You will hear from the people that were with Nicole at the sardine can. You will learn how visibly, physically, and emotionally upset Nicole was at this point. She was so upset that she left the bar alone.
Can you see it though?
Doug's friend did try to stop her, but nothing could stop her at this point. Enough was enough. She had to get away from this. Doug and Greg, the evidence will show, were on their way to the sardine can when they received the information that Nicole had left and was wandering alone. Greg, not Doug, drove his vehicle around for about 30 to 45 minutes trying to find Nicole. They couldn't find her, but they didn't call the police. They didn't keep searching. They went back to the sardine can, or they went to the sardine can for the first time. You will learn that Greg asked several individuals there if they had seen Nicole. You will hear testimony that at this point, when Doug got to the sardine can, he was pissed off and angry at Nicole. It wasn't long, though, before he returned to his priorities. He ordered shots he couldn't pay for, went by a fake name, hit on other women, and once again, snorted amphetamines. Eventually, Greg drove Doug home. On the way home, Greg again was looking to see if he could find Nicole. Still couldn't find her, so Greg continued on to that 2329 Berkeley Road address. Greg and Doug went inside that residence, spoke with the babysitter Dallas, and Greg shortly left shortly thereafter. Doug, now that Greg's out of the picture,
Doug
doesn't do anything to try to find Nicole. Rather, he just smokes weed.
Oh.
As you heard, the following day, Nicole's body was found in the middle of a field off 1374 Hoffman Road. You saw the picture. That's just approximately 3 miles from Doug's house, in the area he lived in the area that you will hear his family helped
Yeah,
build.
because your client killed her there and then dumped her there.
The murder scene was at Doug's home on Berkeley Road. Doug didn't do anything the next day either. You'll hear that in the beginning, Doug didn't do anything. It wasn't until after Nicole's body was found, until after there was a large police presence by Hoffman, that he decided to call in a missing person report. This is not a random act that no one can comprehend. They had it right the first time. Doug murdered Nicole in a fit of jealousy and anger, fueled by insecurity, alcohol, and numerous other drugs.
Huh.
How evidence is going to show you, once you have the whole picture, is that Doug murdered Nicole. Again, that's not what we're here for. We're here for George Burch. George, who is presumed innocent.
Well, it's funny that we're
This is
here
about
for
whether the
George,
state can
but
convince you-
spent all this time talking
convince you.
about Doug.
Beyond a reasonable doubt that George did this. The evidence is going to show you Doug did this. At the very least, it's going to give you significant doubt about whether or not George did this. This is going to be a long trial, but hang with us. By the end of the trial, we will get you all of the pieces that you need to solve this puzzle. That's why, in the end, during our closing argument, we're going to come back before you and ask you, to return a not guilty verdict, we are going to ask you to not convict George Burch for a crime that he did not commit. Thank you.
Parking trucks or equipment or whatever. That's where I park my truck.
Stop talking! Jesus, I don't want you to play. Well, so the opening statements from both sides. Not really moved by either one. This poor young lady was brutally murdered. Yeah. It was a very, very sad story for this young lady. And she has young children. And it's very awful that this happened to her. And it really like I said, this is why I don't want to have watched things prior to reacting live-ish, because it's going to taint my thought process, because all I can think about is how he's going to testify, and I've seen bits and pieces of it. I haven't seen all of it, so that'll be a fun reaction to it, but I know he does testify, and the story he tries to spin is freaking absurd. Just mind-boggling. So I don't understand how they're even here to defend this man. That's why. But this is the process, and this is part of it all. So yeah. I don't really know what else to say. Their opening statements, both sides, just kind of sucked. Like, neither one of them wowed me. Defense disgusts me. Prosecution's just like, yep, this is what it is. We've got these, and we've got receipts, and we're just gonna wipe the floor with them. And I'm here for that. So I will be waiting on that. And that's what we shall do. So there. That's how that goes. Okay. Well, we will end this one here because this is a good stopping point for closing, to close it out, because that's the opening statements. And then let's actually take a look here. We got opening statements. What's the rest of the day look like? Yeah, we'll put the rest of the day on the next one. So yeah. All right. Peace out. See you on the next one.